and gentlemen, welcome to episode 81 of PD's Awesome Guest Panel. And this is no ordinary episode. This is a special Thanksgiving edition of PD's Guest Panel. Now, before we meet tonight's special, iconic, legendary guest star, I want to introduce today's special guest co-host. First of all, my brother-in-law and Resident Evil enthusiast, Mr. Peter Lanza. And of course, coming back as a recurring guest co-host, once again, my best friend and fellow Resident Evil fan too, Mr. Christopher Petey.
Hey, yo.
Now, before I introduce this gentleman, let me just tell you a little bit about this man. This is the man who in 1999 was kicking so much ass. Fast forward 6 years later, this guy was kicking so much ass again for the Kingdom Hearts series. And he's one of my favorite video game voiceovers of all time. I guess time is the one and only Carlos Oliveira himself, Mr. Vince Corazza. Vince, how are you today, sir? Welcome.
I'm doing well, Peter. How you doing, man?
Fantastical, sir.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. We got a good panel going today. Let's have some fun.
Absolutely.
All right.
That's what we're all about, sir.
Let's talk some video games. Let's talk some animation. Let's just talk.
Let's do it. I'm gonna dive in with the first question, and that is gonna be your typical cliche one, and that is, how did you get your first start into acting? Take me there, or take us there.
Let's go way back. Let's go OG here. I was in 6th grade. The teacher decided we were gonna put on some school plays I think it was for the Christmas holidays. Yeah, it would have been for the Christmas holidays. And I ended up getting cast in the lead. It was the, traditional thing. It was the, you know what, guys, hang on a second.
Sure.
I think I have my email open, so I don't want that to keep dinging as we're doing this. Let me shut that.
No worries.
Way further.
Not
yeah. I just heard it. I was like, no, that's gonna be super annoying. I don't want that happening. All right, we're back. We're good to go. Yeah, I don't want that email dinging sound in the background all the time. So I was in 6th grade. I got cast in the lead. We actually did 2 school plays, and so I don't even exactly remember how old I was back then. And I just remember, rehearsing with the class and getting ready, and it was just fun and playful. And then all of a sudden, we got up on that stage in front of everybody, and I just remember my heart racing like 1,000 beats a second, and I just thought, I think I'm gonna die on this stage. Like I was just so terrified, but then so exhilarated and so filled with energy. And I kept remembering, like, in between my lines, I would feel as if my chest was gonna explode, like I couldn't catch my breath. And then all of a sudden, it was time to do my stuff, and it would just happen. Like I was just doing it and going. So when I was speaking my lines, I would forget everything else. And then when I wasn't, I was so self-conscious and aware. And then I remember when the show was over thinking, oh my God, I must have sucked. I must have been terrible. I was the lead role in the plays. But then people were coming up afterwards and going, wow, you were awesome. You were great. You're so natural. And I kept thinking to myself, they must have saw that I was terrified. They must have saw that I was, they must have seen that I was not good. And maybe they were lying to me. But I remember thinking, if I can feel that kind of energy, that kind of like life and death, where you just feel like this is exciting, this is terrifying, and then connecting with all these people, I just thought, I think this is something that could, be exciting for the rest of my life. And so that's the real genesis. That's the moment that like made the light bulb go off and where I wanted to be an actor. And then after that, I just always loved, I loved watching animation, cartoons like Scooby-Doo, Transformers, G-Force, like old school stuff, because I'm old school. Way pre Japanese anime. I mean, we didn't even know what that was when I was a kid. And I just remember always imitating those voices as I would watch it. I would watch the shows, but I was just so fascinated with the cool sounds and the characters and expressive voices. And so I would imitate stuff, especially Scooby-Doo. It was one of my favorite cartoons as a kid, and so I'd like hear those voices, and then I'd be like, Reggie, and just imitating stuff. And I was like, well, that's so cool. And it was, shocking to me that I could also do that. And I just thought anybody could do that. I thought it was so natural, but not everybody can. And so that's kind of the those are kind of the stepping stones, the the real sort of genesis of it all. And then I started acting in school plays. The rest is kind of like that story of starting to think, okay, how can I pursue this when I didn't know anybody that was in the business? My mom found an acting teacher downtown Toronto, and I was like 14 years old at the time. She would drive me on the weekends to go take his class. And then I went to university, studied at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada. It's now, I think, called Toronto Metropolitan University. They just changed the name. And then got an agent at the end of school, and the rest is history. That's then they started sending me for auditions, and I started booking work, and thank God, knock on wood, it's still going, still going.
That's awesome, sir. And Pete, before you ask your question, though, I just want to say, Vince, I just wanted to pay tribute in any way I can. That's why I decided to get all your pictures of your claim to fame right here on the wall right here. I had your Resident Evil, like of course your Kingdom Heart, Brace Face, everything, and Sailor Moon.
Yeah, and that's that picture of me live action is actually, I think that's Stargate, right? It's Stargate Q1. Yeah. I'm like seeing that. That's cool, right on. Some of the highlights.
Absolutely, I want to pay tribute to it in the biggest way I can.
Oh man, thank you.
No problem. Pete, your question, sir?
So when it comes to like voiceover work,
Yeah.
and anything like that, when it comes to like method acting, is there anything like particular that you do before role preparation? Is there a voice that comes to your head before you come into a character or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a interesting question. I mean, I have sort of a I think technique that you hone and learned the basic principles of things in university, and and through my mentor Louis Bowmander back in Toronto. That was the acting class that I took for years before I trained at university. So I have a process of like analyzing script, which is standard. Wants, what do you want, what are you fighting for, what's your motivation, things like that. But then I think every individual has a way of processing information. For me, I do tend to try to find a voice. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people also ask another complimentary question of like, what's your favorite, voice acting or on camera acting or stage acting? And that is just an impossible answer. I mean, they all are intertwined. That the work is creating character, finding motivation, trying to find the truth and authenticity of a scene, what is really going on, even if it's just entertainment and a fun thing that you would think, what's the deep meaning? It's just a fun animation thing, or some video game that's it's not life or death. Doesn't have some big message that it's saying, but you're still trying to find the truth, the authenticity of what is going on from the moment to moment, and then the overall storyline. And for me, it typically roots itself vocally. I'm very audio sort of synced up. Like I hear things. I can always pick out people's voices, just in 2 seconds from a TV if I know them. I mean, if I don't know the person, I'll be like, but if I like the sound or whatever. But if I go, oh, I know that, and my wife always is like, how do you, and she's a voiceover performer too, and she's great. But she's always like, how did you know it was that person? I go, I don't know. It's just I'm just very audio kind of, forward. And so, yeah, I typically like to find the voice. There's something about the voice that really helps to influence, where I think a person lives. And I also think your voice is an immediate, like, obviously our look is the first thing that people encounter if they're meeting us, right? So you get what we like to in the business call, it's your hit. What's your hit as soon as you walk in a room, right? Someone looks at you and goes, you're this kind of a person. We have these general sort of ideas of what things are. But the minute you speak, it's a really interesting, the way we communicate with audio without even having to actually hear words and stuff instantly will give us things like, where's that person from? Like local places, even if you're from the same areas. Like if we're New Yorkers, you can almost tell instantly if like someone's from the Bronx or someone's from Brooklyn, or I mean, so those kinds of things also tell you about who a person actually is, because where they're from, the way they speak, you know, you can instantly tell. I mean, not always, but you can kind of glean if a person is highly educated, has a lot of, you know, there's little subtle things that the voice tells you about a person. And so I find that is one of the first things I always try to find. So that's, you know, and then you know, the emotional thing, like the depth of emotion, what's the, and you know, and authenticity is a big thing for me. What's the truth of a scene, even if it's an outrageous thing, like you're playing an alien, which you go, okay, well, nobody's an alien, there is no, you know, is there such a thing? And you go, well, it doesn't matter if something's been written on page, there's always conflict. And then, you know, what's the motivation of that character, regardless of whether it's an alien, a human being, or an animal, or, you know, and so then you're looking for what's the truth of the scene. What is the, how can I be the most authentic as myself in this particular situation? You know, that was a long answer. Wow.
No, that was great.
That was a very good answer. Very
It's
good.
it's good to know that like that much insight goes into the acting aspect of it, because not a lot of people do think that way. So it's very insightful.
I even feel it. I mean, what's fascinating too is when you do it, you know, I'm going on 30 years now being a professional actor. When you do it for so long, everything I just said is instantaneous. It's like, you know, it's what I do. So it's second nature. But even if I'm like just reading commercial copy, you know, like, you know, I mean, I do the promos for the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Even if I'm reading copy like that, you know, tonight on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, you know, Stephen welcomes Brad Pitt. You know, even you're doing that, you'd think, what's the motivation behind that? You're just announcing somebody coming to show. But the motivation is, I want to get people excited. There's still a character that I'm playing. And it's funny because people will say to me, you know, oh, you changed your voice for that. And I go, no, I never actually physically in my mind think I'm changing my voice. What I'm changing is what I'm thinking. I'm going, oh, I'm excited. This is cool. Brad Pitt's going to be on Stephen Colbert, or Barack Obama is going to appear on, you know, Stephen Colbert. So then I get excited, which naturally adds a flavor to your sound. It gets, you know, there's energy. So, you know, and so I'm not thinking, oh, I should sound excited. I'm thinking, this is awesome.
You're looking for the drive for it.
Right.
Yeah.
This is awesome. I can't wait to tell people that this is happening. You know what I mean? So like, even if you're saying a line like, even if you're just, like I said, if you're doing something just generic, like, you know, introducing the all new iPhone 14 or something like that, you know what I mean? You know, I'm not saying just a line. I'm trying to communicate a feeling. I'm trying to make people, you know, hey, did you guys know I'm introducing the iPhone, the all new iPhone 14? Or if the let's say the producers are just saying, you know what, we don't want to oversell this. We just want to let people know. So this is to be more informative. Then so it's an intention. It's always a motivation. Something you're playing a scene, even if there's no one else opposite you. You know what I mean? You're telling a story.
Right.
Right. In everything. Which I also find that's one of the things I love about narration too. Like narrating stuff. Even that you're still a character. You're part of the actual show. You know, whether you're the narrator of a documentary or the narrator of you know, an animation story or a movie. You're still a character in that show. Even if I'm not actually talking to other people, I'm talking to the viewer. So I have an intention. I have a feeling that I want to communicate. I have information I want to communicate to people, and so that's always to me where it starts from, you know. But it happens a lot of times very fast. If someone hands me a piece of copy and all the line is introducing the all new iPhone 14, I'm not going to sit and write out like a novel about what am I feeling, you know.
No, you kind of got the idea already, like
right.
how to get there. Yeah.
Right. There's generally, but you know, you instantly go, oh, as soon as I see the words, it always starts with the words on the page. As soon as you see those words, you have a general kind of idea of like, oh, I see what's the scenario, what's the situation, and what am I communicating? And then that influence. So it's automatic that you think those things. But I always try to tell people that at panels or conventions or stuff when I'm talking to people about acting, that if all you do is start with, if all you're doing is playing an energy or like, you know, or a sound, that can sometimes work. But generally, especially if you're creating character, especially if you're doing animation or video games and stuff like that, you're going to not necessarily create as rich a landscape, as rich a story for your character over over a story arc or from moment to moment. Whereas the more detailed information, the more you let your imagination play, even if it's not something. It's fascinating too. I love David Mamet, True and False, in his book, when he talks about creating character. He said, I have lots of actors come up to me and say, David, how can I create a good character? And he always says, live your life with character, and then you'll be an interesting person, and then you'll just naturally be interested. You'll make interesting choices. He's like, if all you're doing is sitting around going, I want to be an actor, or he's like, you'll be a shallow, uninteresting person. He's like, go out there and find hobbies, go out there, experience life, do things, fall in love, go on adventures, see the world, and you'll have experiences and ideas, and it'll feed your imagination, so that when you enter a scene, you can make interesting choices. You'll have interesting thoughts running through your head, so that will influence the way you tell a story, which naturally creates character and makes things interesting. Because it's the details are what people glean on, or what people make people go, oh my god, I love that. Like, you think of these video games that I've been in, and some of these animated shows, and they're fun, and like some of these, especially with the video games, they're little cut scenes, they're not very long, they'll be little bits and pieces, right? But if you don't come to that moment with some sort of story and some sort of interesting details and stuff, it's just not as fascinating to the people playing the games. It's more interesting when they hear little subtle things. It's like I always say, when you see actors like Danny Trejo, or someone like that who just has such a fascinating face, right?
Yeah.
Or Javier Bardem, or Robert De Niro, or Meryl Streep. That's one of her incredible qualities, is that woman can say so much with just an eyebrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when you have interesting faces too, sometimes you don't even have to do anything, because it's just interesting to look at that. Whereas sometimes when we see, just a really good looking person, it's beautiful to look at, but it's not sometimes as interesting as someone who has like scar, or wrinkled face, because you're like, oh, that tells a story.
Yeah.
Instantly, it's like The Voice, where you go, oh, that person's lived, or that person's been somewhere, or or they've. And we pick up on those kinds of cues with it, either through the voices, the audio, or through our own eyes. We pick up on tiny little things so fast, like our brains process information at a mile a minute. You know what I mean? And so that's why the more richer, the deeper that you can find little bits and pieces, even for simple cutscene. And then it's crazy, which I always love. And then I meet people like yourselves who love parts that I've played, and I'll be like, wow, that's, it's just nice to know that, like, the detail connected, those kinds of things connected,
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And Chris, before you ask the next question, I just want to
Yeah.
say that listen, like you mentioned before, like you could tell with a voice like who's from like New York and who's from Brooklyn. Could you tell my voice?
Yeah, I was like, definitely New Yorker as soon as you opened your mouth. I assumed I'm not an original New Yorker. I'm from Toronto, Canada, then Los Angeles for over a decade, now New York for almost 10 years. But I never like to assume like where a person exactly from. But as soon as I heard you talking, my brain went, that sounds Brooklyn to me.
Thank you.
Right on.
Chris, your question, sir?
What are some of the disadvantages you find doing voice acting?
Disadvantages to doing voice acting? I would say probably the only one that I find is when we often, which is done, and I get it because of trying to schedule multiple people's timelines, and and also especially during COVID, being in the same room with someone was virtually impossible. And a lot of actors were spread out all over the world now. I always love when I can play off of another actor, and we don't do that as much. It's a very rare thing in voiceover. We often record our own lines by ourselves. We're just a director, producer, and so you're creating scenes and situations where you have no idea how the other person's going to read a line, or how they're going to react to what you say. And so, and as I was saying in my long-winded answer about acting earlier, you lose detail. You don't get as much detail when you can't be in the same room as someone, or even just even if we're not in the same room, but we're on, in a studio talking at the same time on mics. The way a person might deliver a line could be totally different than what I'm hearing in my own mind, which would make me react differently. So I always that's one of the biggest disadvantages. I would say probably that's the only one, other than sometimes too, when you're in a studio, especially if it's a exciting scene, or an action scene where you're moving, you're doing stuff. There's only so much movement you can actually physically do, because otherwise it'll affect the sound on the microphone, and so that's a bit of a disadvantage too when you're trying to portray something where you have to limit your movement so that it doesn't take you off the mic. You want to hear that. Like if I'm running in a scene, I'll actually physically like make a running motion, so that part, you get that breath thing as I'm delivering a line that sounds different like this. You know what I mean? Whereas if I'm sitting still and just pretending to run, I can fake that. I can be like, I'm pretending to run, and I can still do it because I know what it feels like, but it sounds way more interesting if you're actually making movement and doing stuff, and so when you're doing something like that in real life, like either on a stage or in front of a camera, you don't have to, there's one step less in creating the detail. When you're doing it in a booth, there's an extra thing that your brain is processing where it's creating that situation. Whereas if it's happening on a set or on stage, you're more reacting to the situation. If I'm picking up a glass and drinking it on a stage or in front of a camera, I'm gonna actually physically do that. Whereas in front of a mic, you would rarely ever do that because that actual sound effect could interfere with what your voice is, and they want a clean piece of sound so that they can edit it later and adjust it to whatever they're doing with it. So then your brain has to go, okay, act as if you're drinking a glass of water,
Right.
which is just an extra layer of that takes that small millisecond of disconnect from physically doing something and just playing the intention, just playing the scene, and just playing the reality of what you're doing. You have to also create the reality in the moment. But I also, that is a little bit of a disadvantage, but I also love that. There's something fun, and that's why I always say I can't pick between what I love doing the most, because when you're in a booth, that's an extra challenge, which also
You
makes
love the challenge, right?
yeah, that makes it more interesting. It's like somebody going, if you're running, I don't know, like a Tough Mudder event or a Ninja Warrior course, you're like, boy, I'd sure love to do some of the easier stuff because it'll get me through. But if you're doing that kind of stuff, you're also going, oh, bring on the harder stuff. Like where I fail is where it's going to be more fun. That's going to be something where I'll be like, okay, now I got to work harder. I got to challenge myself. And so that's also something that is different, a little bit of a disadvantage, but makes voice acting even more fun at times than physically acting in front of people, because you really have to, we're always using our imagination to create the scenarios and stuff, but in a booth where you're by yourself with a pair of headsets on in front of a mic, trying to create a battle scene, or Zexion passive aggressively manipulating someone, or Carlos fighting some zombies. There's something really fun about going, okay, none of that's happening at all. I'm just standing in front of this mic, and now I have to paint the picture in my mind of like the detail, like so much detail, so it can be interesting to the listener and the person playing the game.
Agreed. And I gotta ask you this question, Mr. Corazza, because I'm very curious to know this. I've had many voice actors on the show, and they've all had different answers to this question.
Sure.
According to a DVD commentary of The Simpsons, I'm a big Simpson fan.
Oh, I love The Simpsons. Yeah.
Me too. Kirk Douglas apparently refused to wear headphones because they hurt his ears during the recording. Do you prefer headphones on or off?
On, 100% on. Yeah, I can't. I honestly, I've had to do jobs where for some reason, I always find it ridiculous to me. You can hear my disdain in my voice right now. So, when they're like, take the headphones off, it'll be so much better. We'll get more authenticity because you're listening to yourself. I go, yeah, absolutely. I'm listening to myself. I'm like, if I can't hear the way I sound on the microphone, then I don't know if that's working. I don't know if that's, I mean, granted, I've been in this business for so long, 30 years now, that I instantly, instinctually know where to stand in front of a mic, know how to pull back if I'm yelling so that I'm not blasting out the microphone. I know how to, if I'm supposed to be off mic, I know how to turn away and say my line so it sounds like I'm talking, I'm not on the mic. Those are little technical things, but if you don't have the headsets on, I can't hear. Am I too far from the mic now? Does that sound like if all of
Right.
a sudden if I'm playing a scene where I'm supposed to be talking really close to someone, you know what I mean? Like we're face to face, and I'm just like, listen, man, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, I have to be able to instantly hear how close to the mic. You know what I mean? I have to play that idea, like how close am I to that person's face? Or if all of a sudden it's more like we're 20 feet away from each other and I'm screaming, listen, man, if you don't do what I tell you, I'm gonna kill you. Like, so if I can't, if it's amazing how just an inch difference in front of a mic can sound 5 feet away, 20 feet away, 100 feet away. You know what I mean? Just those subtle differences from, and so if you don't have those headset on, a director can say, oh, you sounded 10 feet away. Can you move an inch back? But your brain, then that's again another step where I have to add a detail where I'm going, rather than experiencing it firsthand in the moment, now I can adjust. Now I'm, instead of trying to go, my brain's going, how's that sounding? Is that right? Is that working? I can instantly know that's working. That makes sense. So now I can focus on the scene. I can focus on what I'm doing. So I do not understand when people say they don't wear headsets. I just don't get it. Granted, I will say there are actors, like, I mean, I'm never going to criticize a Kirk Douglas legend. But I have seen certain, that's for me, that's just a personal thing. I have seen certain actors who find that hearing themselves also makes them self-conscious, where it makes them judge the way so they go, for them, it's better not to have the headsets on. It's better for a director to say to them, you're too far off the mic. I need you to come a little closer. They prefer that. Because they don't think about those things. They don't care about the quality of the sound. They're going, that's up to other people to do. The editors will take care of that. The director will take care of that. I'm just going to play the scene. I'm going to play the realism. And I have no, I don't personally think one is better than the other. Well, I actually do personally think one is better than the other. I think wear headsets, but that's my personal opinion. But again, I appreciate every person's process, and I go, if it works for you and it gets you the results and it sounds authentic and it sounds truthful and real, all the power, man. Do what works for you.
Go for it.
Do you
Yeah,
ever feel like
I will say, just last quickly, too, I do get, like, I've done many jobs where I've been on headsets for like over 8 hours at times, where you stop for breaks here and there. It does hurt. It can start to feel predator. I mean, I have, the best quality headsets and stuff, even with, doesn't matter what you're doing. You need, and that's the unfortunate thing too. Earbuds are not great because they leak sound, which can influence them. So that's why you want over ears. And I know people who go, hey, man, I just can't wear the headsets for that. I can't do like 4 hours with a headset on. It gives me a headache. Like, well, you don't want that to happen. So,
Yeah,
so
definitely. I also face too whenever I use a headset, especially if I'm like just laying in bed and listening to something to help me relax, and it's just not fun in the end.
Yeah.
But, sorry, you too?
Yeah, I totally get that, and I mean, if that's going to take away from your ability to enjoy what you're doing and play and focus on the job. If you're going, oh, my head's hurting or my ears are like, it's pushing, I'm totally get that too. I just personally think, that in the moment when you hear yourself, you are able to make tiny little adjustments and things like that can help to enhance the quality. Because what we do when we do either commercials, narration, promos, video games, animation, it is all audio based. Right. So, you need to be able to make those subtle little adjustments like that. If all of a sudden I'm talking to somebody and we're 2 feet apart, and then I want to make it intense and I like move forward into the microphone, that's going to, you know what I mean? It's going to, so if I can hear that happening, it enhances the nuance of what you're doing. And with those headset on, I just feel like that's for me. I love that play, that detail, that the layer that it adds.
Agreed.
That's great. I mean, I've had a couple of experiences with the headsets before in the studio, like many years ago. I used to have like issues where I couldn't hear myself in the headset, where maybe I heard too much of myself, so I would have one ear off and then one ear on,
That's what I would do.
and everybody just had such a different method. It's just so crazy how much music and voice acting can intertwine.
Intertwine, yeah.
I actually one of the ways that we do a lot of dubbing stuff, when you're like, if you're looping for on camera, where you got to come in and clean a line because say there was a noise in the mic, or you know what I mean, you're on set, so like a wind could blow and that might give a pop on the mic, and then they go, well, that's the take we want to use, but now we need the actor to come in and re-record that line so the audio is better quality. You often do that with just one headset. It's like a one you hold. Sometimes they have the half the thing, because in that moment you have to be listening to what's happening on camera, watching it, waiting for the signal to speak your line, and you need to in that moment be able to, okay, I need to hear, but I need to also hear what's playing in the scene, and so you get a more authentic sound by actually doing the half headset idea. Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, that's another layer too of why I always say, when people say pick stage, pick film, pick voiceover, and I go, I can't pick. There's the challenge and the nuances, and I mean that's the whole reason I got into it. Is it's like, and also one of the reasons I can never pick what I like the most is they also influence each other. You learn things when you're on stage doing something where you go, oh, that it creates a memory, and you go, I can bring that if in a scene in front of a microphone. I can, remember that feeling, remember that moment. That helps to feed your imagination. Again, as David Mamet said, live your life with character. Go do interesting things, and it constantly influences the other things you're doing. And so my voice work often creates things where I'm like, oh, I can bring that to film and TV, or I can bring that to the stage, or in this character, and so it's I again just that idea that like where I love hearing the detail is also why I love all mediums, because they create more detail, they create more nuance,
right,
more life experience.
They do create more nuance.
Yeah.
1998. Do you have?
Was I alive back then? I'm way too young.
Oh, geez.
Right? I mean, hang on. Hang on.
Younger than us, right?
I need some collagen. I wasn't alive in 1998.
This takes me back because I remember seeing this movie in theaters when it came out. I was about 6 or 7 years old. I don't know what was my parents' problem, but do you have any memories of shooting the 1998 film Bride of Chucky as Robert Bailey?
Of course, yeah. I mean, that was a blast. We had so much fun on that set for a number of reasons too. The entire crew, Don Mancini, who created it, it was just it was a fun set to be on. It was really cool. Ronnie Wu was, just a great director, really fun guy. Jennifer Tilly was fabulous. Just so, I mean, again, talking about detail, there's a person that just has such an interesting life, I mean, that's why she's always fascinating the minute she opens her mouth or steps in front of a camera. I just had a blast on that. And then to see the way it turned out, like the creepy thing, the opening scene where I'm walking in. I mean, it's the very opening of the movie where I walk into the locker and, pass by paying homage to all the different, Freddy, the glove, the Jason mask, like all that stuff, right? And then getting to the Chucky locker and opening it and grabbing the bag so you don't know which horror film is this, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody knew because they probably were in a theater going, I'm seeing Bride of Chucky, but
I'm getting flashbacks.
I love these meta references.
That was fun too. I mean, I remember, I loved, that was like, one of the things too I loved about the Chucky franchise in general, and now seeing the whole new series, that's so awesome.
Like you were a part of history in that moment.
Here we are 30 years later, and now they're on to what? They just finished second season of Chuck, which is amazing. People still love him. And,
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I loved the first Child's Play. I thought it was brilliant. So I was so excited. All the two Child's Plays, I was so excited to be part of this one. Um, and one of my favorite childhood actors, John Ritter, was in it. So that was, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be in a movie with John Ritter. Unfortunately, we never did any scenes together, but I got to meet him. And that was just cool. Yeah, it was really fun. And one of the really fun things was, my scenes, my stuff that I did, that was the first stuff they shot. Not only was it the opening sequence to the film, but it's also the very first stuff we shot. So the crew, I had been working for years in Canada at that point. And so I knew a lot of the crew members and people like that, the local people. But it was their first days on set. It was all of our it was a real fun bonding thing, you know what I mean? And for the director and Don, everybody was like, okay, we want to get this right, because the studio, it was like, what, a $15 million movie at the time, which doesn't sound like much, but back in 1998,
It was a lot.
That was a big budget. So there was a lot of pressure. It was taking Child's Play and Chucky into a different thing by introducing Jennifer Tilly's, character and her doll that she becomes. And so there was that element too that was really fun. And then, what a great death, man! That was awesome.
Climax.
Yeah, it was a great death, man. I remember I remember the piece that they had to create for the neck. There was a guy sitting in the back of the cop car with a giant bucket, like a vat of fake blood, and like a pump. And so we're in the scene, and so I have to, we shoot. Everything was shot in close up, which was so cool. It was very stylized, and in that like sort of bluish black light, which was awesome. And that's another fascinating thing too. You don't know that. You don't know how that's going to look when you're playing a scene. You're just playing something, and then to see it turn out with that grainy blackish blue, filter quality, it was really cool. And so they shoot a close up of the knife, the finger file coming across my neck. The neck piece it's already pre-cut, right? So I'm just sitting like this. The closer we see the thing go across, I have to tilt my head back, which causes it to open. And they've got a tube basically going up underneath this fake neck piece that looks like my actual neck, and the guy in the back, and then I have to do the blood has to come out, grab my neck, the blood starts pumping out, and he's just in the back, and you're trying not to laugh because you're like playing the scene, and all I can hear is like and blood, and you can feel it. I can't see it as it's happening, but I can just feel this pressure of just this fake maple syrup with red food coloring just flying out of my hands and going everywhere. I was covered in that stuff for a week. I couldn't get it off my skin, but it was fun. That was a fun shoot. I had a great time.
That's great. I was just looking at the screenshots of it to try to find the piece. That's incredible. You wouldn't even think that was back there behind the car.
No. Yeah. It was. We had a good time. Yeah. The only thing I didn't love about that sequence and shooting that was, I was never a smoker, and I had to do that scene, with light the cigarette, and so they did this crazy long shot where it starts on the lighter. It was so extreme close up, where it starts on the lighter lighting, then me putting the cigarette to the lighter, pulling the so that the cigarette burns, and then they tracked right along the cigarette to my face, and then they go up to my eye, and that whole time I had to hold the smoke and then blow it out. And because it was such an extreme close up, and they needed to see the smoke, they needed to see, okay, what's that going to look like? Oh my God, I had to take so many drags on that cigarette that I literally started to turn green. We shot that scene probably 30 times. I started to turn green, and they were like, "Oh God, you're getting pale on camera." So they had to they'd pack the makeup on me, because I was just like, "Oh, I'm getting smoke inhalation," so that was not.
You had to pretend to enjoy it.
Oh, I know.
That was and that was 1998. We're gonna go even further back to 1994 now with this.
What? I'm older than that even.
Chris, what's the next question, my man? Chris, I'm
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So before we get to my next question, actually, it's something I was wondering. Which personally do you consider maybe your favorite Chucky kill throughout the entire franchise?
My favorite Chucky kill. Well, I mean, there's so many, but mine. It's kind of, I mean, it's my favorite kill because I got killed. I love getting killed. I've been killed a million ways. Like I've been killed a lot in my lifetime, not only in film and TV, but on stage. I've been killed. I've been killed in video games, animation. Uh, it's just fun. It's like, you know, it's playtime, right? To see, and also what's so fun about it is to actually you're faking it, right? It's not really happening. So to experience those kinds of, like, I've had my entire body molded where I had to be an entire body cast to make you know, a body laying on a table that wasn't me dead. Those are fun too. You know, the neck casting where they actually create your own neck many times, where you're sitting for hours with straws up your nose, just breathing through straws while you're waiting for the mold to harden. So for me personally, it's my favorite kill just because, you know, I was part of it, and I actually thought it was a really cool kill because it was, uh, you know, like the nail file, and then and then it cuts to her, you know, standing outside the car, filing her nails with a drop of blood on the nail file, and then all of a sudden she reaches in, pulls out the doll, and goes, "Well, hello, Dolly." I mean, it's just it was a great. And then it opens the movie. Like, I think that was a really cool kill. But there's so many good ones. I mean, you know, I mean, they're so creative and clever, and one of the things I love about the Chucky franchise too is it's got that, always got that layer of humor behind it. There's always like a wink and a clever, like even my kill had that really, you know, humorous background to the violence and to the spook and to the scare, you know, I love.
Okay.
The one that stands out most to me is the movie where he's in the military school and he, I think, maybe he goes into a CO's office, and as soon as he's about to kill the CO, the CO has a heart attack, and he's like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!"
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he didn't even have the chance to like cut him open or anything like that.
Exactly, where he's like, "I didn't get to have fun, man. That's what I do." Yeah, no, I remember that one. Yeah, that was great too. I mean, that's the other thing that makes the Child's Play series, and you know, and why it's still so beloved, and why it's a new 2-season series now. I believe they're picked up for season 3 already. Because it's clever, it's funny. I mean, there's nothing better than being scared, being like, you know, getting that thrill of the you know, the impact and the visuals and stuff, but then also getting to laugh, to release that tension with the humor that's so brilliantly, cleverly created and played. Love that.
Awesome. And I actually before you ask your question, Chris, I have a question.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask a question, guys? Somebody's got something playing.
Yeah, Chris, mute your microphone.
Yeah, someone's got something playing in the back. It's
Yeah.
really hard for me to hear.
My apologies, Vince.
No problem. No problem. No problem.
The question I have for you, and this is the question that everybody's been waiting for: memories of shooting the 1999 PlayStation 1 Resident Evil 3 as Carlos Oliveira.
Yes. Memories of that. Probably my biggest memory is that was my first video game. Like that was the first time I did, especially a role of that size. So you're not only creating a character, but you have to sustain it over, like we recorded for, it was over a week of sessions, like 8-hour days for a solid, like I feel like it was 7 days or so, and then having to come back months later as they tweak things and realize they need new lines or pickups or they want to change something. So you're creating a character that has to sustain, be consistent, make sense, have a full life. That's the first time I'd ever done something like that on a microphone. One of the cool things too is Jill and I recorded together. The woman who played Jill, what was her name again? I always forget. You guys.
Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine. That's right.
I forget the last name, but it's Catherine.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And so we actually, we were in the booth together recording almost all our stuff. Occasionally, when you know, are doing stuff like the fighting sequences or the damage sequences, you're going to do all that by yourself because you're just knocking out things like a short punch, a medium punch, a long punch. It's all by yourself. So you're never going to be in the booth with the other person. It's, you know, just boring for them to watch you do that stuff. But all our sequences and scenes were played together, which was so much fun. And also because it's the first time I ever did that, always made me sad when you couldn't do, you know, when you're by yourself playing things with other characters, because I was like, ah, oh, man, that made it so much more interesting and detailed. And I think that's one of the things that made the video game so beloved too, is it brought nuance to the game. Like we were able to play off each other, so to create more detail in the scenes. I'd never seen a game like this. Like I said, I was not a video game player of those types of games, but when I was a little kid, I played Miss Pac-Man. I loved, you know, arcade games. I was a big arcade game guy, like Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, 1941, Ghosts and Goblins, you know, all those games.
Would you say Donkey Kong too?
Oh yeah, Donkey Kong, all of it. Yeah, I mean, I was a big foosball, you know, Jatoni, table soccer, love that, love pinball,
Air
crazy.
hockey?
I'm a Canadian, of course. I mean, you just if the word hockey is in it, I love it. That's just we're born that way. That's an evolutionary thing about Canadians. Like we're the only reason we're not born with skates is because those blades are dangerous. But you know, otherwise, the minute you pop out, they put skates on you, and they're like, "Let's go, man, get on the ice." Going back to the game, you know, it was the first time doing that, and so it was just such an educational experience for me too. I learned so much. I got to play. I got to see this, you know, world that I'd never experienced before, and I was like, this is awesome. This is so detailed and fascinating. Yeah, and also getting to, you know, create a voice like that. Like I said, I had never at that point had to play a character for a long period of time, sustain it over multiple, you know, come back the next day, record. Like, so you have to immediately get back into character, make it sound authentic, make it consistent on the microphone. Yeah, I learned so much doing that and loved it. And it's, you know, it's been a huge influence in terms of the progression of my career afterwards.
Awesome, sir. And Pete, your next question?
That's perfect. That actually leads me into my next question, because Resident Evil is no stranger to really cheesy voice lines. So Resident Evil 3, I want to say, is the first time I felt like there was a really good chemistry between the characters.
Right.
And I want to say, not now knowing that you and the woman who played Jill were in the booth together, I want to say that played a different dynamic.
Yeah.
Because I remember the first time you meet Carlos, it was probably one of the most ridiculous lines I ever heard. And then I was like, this is fantastic, though. You're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, and you got Carlos that just saves her from fighting Nemesis. And his first thing is, hey, who are you? I got to ask you something. He's like, I know. You want to ask me out? All the foxy ladies love my accent. It drives them crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I mean, that's the line whenever I go to conventions and stuff, and people, or if I'm signing autographs and stuff, and people are like, do a Carlos line. I always do that line, and everybody immediately is like, yes. You know, I have to say, even for me, I mean,
it's a line that stands out for me as well.
Yeah, and even for me, you're going back like, God, what's that, like 20 some odd years ago, right? It was just cool to, again, one of the reasons why I love the Chucky franchise is there was you're creating a story that is scary, dangerous, all this stuff, and there was constant humor, constant little drips of humor, you know, which just makes it more interesting. It's more detailed, it's more fascinating, it's more so that you're like reacting to something like, oh my God, they just saved the thing, or we just, you know, help them, because you're the game player too, right? So you're involved, and then all of a sudden they come out with this thing where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming, which makes you just enjoy it more. You get a laugh, you get, you know, that's just fun. Like, I mean, that's the whole reason why we do this. We want to create interesting things that are where you put people, like either a game player or an audience member in a theater or an audience member at a film or watching TV. You want to put people in situations that they don't expect or they've never experienced, so that they can feel that moment and go, that's cool, or I never thought of that, or well, that's hilarious, or you want people to feel things. And you know, and for me, that I think that's the most distinct thing is, you know, having this dream as a young kid of wanting to create stuff like that. And that was the first time I got to do it on that level, and I was like, this is as much fun as I thought it would be. You know what I mean? This is awesome.
So you would probably say that was your favorite Carlos line or scene for the game?
Come on, yeah, of course. It's the cool. I mean, it again, just like the Bride of Chucky, to be in an when you're introduced as anything in, you know, even if it's just a 2 second something, to have something that just has a twist, to have something that has that, like, that came out of left field where people would never expect that. Um, that's magic, right? That just, you're like, you know, you're a kid in a candy store. You're a kid getting a transformer for Christmas, you know, and going, oh my God, this is so much fun. I can't wait to play. And that's, you know, we're actors. That's what basically, we're just, you know, I'm just a grown up 2-year-old who just can't wait to play and make believe and want to, you know what I mean? And so in that moment, you're like, I wouldn't have written something like that. That's fun. That's cool. Like, you know, and how now put myself in that situation where I've just been fighting a zombie trying to save this woman's life. And all of a sudden and she's like, hey, I want to ask you something. And your reaction is to go, yeah, I know. All the foxy ladies love my accent. Drives them crazy. You know, you want to ask me out. You know what I mean? I know that. Yeah. You're like, ask me out in the middle of a zombie apocalypse? What do you mean? Where are we going to go? To a coffee shop, have a coffee while the zombies are trying to kill us? Like, but clever, like hilarious, right?
It's fantastic. You don't understand how much those characters mean to a lot of people in the Resident Evil community. Like, you guys are like, especially the OG cast, you guys are like superheroes to us. You don't understand, man.
Oh man.
Likewise.
Well, and listen, I mean, it's a two-way street. I absolutely love going to conventions, meeting fans. I love signing autographs, talking to people, because you know, you don't get into this business to just to do it to stand in front of a mirror and act and go, oh, I think that was good. You know, you get into it to share it with the other people, and you hope that not only is it an experience for me that will influence my life and be memories and create a world that I'll be able to have for the rest of my life, but you're hoping that it will exactly do that, touch other people and make them feel you know, things, whether it's the same thing you're feeling or something different. I love when people come up to me and talk about something I've done, and it's the way it affected them is completely different than what I thought would happen. That's one of my favorite things, because you go, that's the beauty of art, is like, you know, you look at you look at a Michelangelo, you know, the David, and you could put 100 people in a room and you'll get 100 different, you know, even if somebody says, oh, I love the detail in the veins and the arms or whatever, but the way they interpret it or the way they're seeing that detail is different for every single person. And that's what we want to do. It's shared experience. It's like, you know, us
It is.
playing together.
Share the experience.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for that.
yeah. Chris, your next question, sir.
Okay. So what are your memories working on the Kingdom Hearts series as Xion and Lenzo?
What are my experiences? Well, that was one of my, I think, I'm trying to remember if that was my very, very first, or I think it was my first video game after I'd moved to Los Angeles, playing a lead character. Yeah, it was definitely my first time after moving to LA where I played a lead character in a video game. I think I might have done some smaller roles and stuff like that. I can't remember exactly the timeline of it all. So that was exciting. That was fun too. That was, you know, I mean, I had the history of doing tons of voice work at that point, but getting to do your first game where you go, okay, I'm making this move to a whole new country, new city, you know, and then getting to be a part of that series. That was awesome. Also, what was fun about that series was, you know, the Disney tie-in stuff, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, wicked cool.
Yeah, I mean, you know, who isn't influenced by Disney, right? Like the characters that we all grew up with of our childhood, and then to see them take those characters and put such an interesting spin, right, and like metaverse it, you know what I mean? Like you think of Marvel, which ironically now owned by Disney, but we think of like the Marvel, the MCU, right, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stuff. I mean, Kingdom Hearts is kind of a precursor to that, right? It's like it was Disney's creating a video game that layers in all these different characters from different worlds, from, I mean, decades and decades of history, and then giving them all a storyline where they're, you know, working together or or working against each other. That was super fascinating.
It was definitely genius
Definitely.
on both Square Enix and Disney
Yeah.
because they basically morphed. If you grew up with Disney and you were growing up as a teenager, you probably played a bunch of Square Enix games as a teenager, but as a kid, you watched Disney movies. And the fact that they took
Yeah.
both and put them into one, it was like, what? You just put peanut butter and jelly together.
Yeah, it was a
Totally. Chocolate and
total
peanut butter,
fun.
exactly. Peanut butter, exactly. That's a great analogy. I love it. I'm gonna steal that, Peter. So if you hear me say that in other interviews, I'll be like, yeah, it's like putting peanut butter and jelly together.
I'll take
You
it.
got your own, you
Yeah.
got your own
For
conglomerate.
me, though, the other thing that was really fun about that was what I loved was working with the Japanese producers where they were in Japan at the time and then calling in. So they would be giving information to the director about what's going on with my character. And it, this is a whole new world that I had no clue of what it meant other than I knew about the mashup. I'd read the backstory, stuff like that, the packet that they'd given me before so I could understand what's going on, what's the overall idea in this game. But then having them, because Zexion at the time, Enzo wasn't part of any world. He'd never been created. He was in this new character. So then you're creating this new idea, and my character, which is fascinating because he's completely passive aggressive, right? He's a manipulator, and so a lot of the other characters had more overt personality types, but my guy is all cerebral. He's all like, he's trying to think 100 steps ahead of everybody else. And so that's fun to play because you don't get a lot of physical stuff, but you have to play detail stuff of like, just saying lines like, hello, Vexen, nice of you to join us. Just stuff like that where he's not saying, just hello somebody, nice of you to join us. It's so layered, like there's 1,000 things. He's saying everything but hello, nice of you to join us. He's saying, hey asshole, or thanks for showing up. There's just all this, which is so much fun to play. And manipulation, passive aggressive is totally fun because it's just the subtle tale of a lot, nice of you to join us, flip it up at the end. It's like, it's luscious. It's I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. So he was a fun character and very different than a lot of the other Organization 13 people, right? They're all like, they were all, they're nobodies. They were all they were the what do you call it? The not duplicate, but they're like other self in the dark world, the Organization 13 thing.
Like doppelgangers.
Exactly. That's the word. So there's all these different. So in just a simple line, there's just oodles of like layers, like an onion that you're just peeling back. You're not just saying like, you're not just saying some simple line of like, nice of you to join us. You're saying 400 things with that line because there's all this history and detail. It's just fun.
Absolutely. And before we conclude, Vince, I just have a couple more questions before we conclude. And one of the questions I had for you, and I want to touch upon what you said actually about how the acting and how it's like, pronunciate like the words. And by the way, like you, I love amazing storytelling. I believe in full storytelling. And this is my next question. If we have to do a scene, like if you're doing a scene with a particular actor and that particular actor asks you to tap on real life emotion, like raw emotion, and they go up and the scene involves you screaming at somebody in anger in a heated argument, this person, I'll just say me, for example, if I was doing a scene with you and I say, excuse me, Mr. Corazza, and I would say that because I have so much respect for you since I was a 9-year-old boy.
You can really stop that. Just please call me Vince, because honestly, Mr. Karaz is somebody, I don't know who that person is. That's
okay.
I've never been that formal in my life. I've got a T-shirt on. If I put a suit on and we're, maybe I might say, please refer to me as Mr. Karaz. But
Okay.
it's just Vince. It's just Vince.
Well, Vince, like if we were in a scene where like we have to get into a heated argument and you have to like lay into me and I tell to you, Vince, this scene says that you have to lay into me. I know this is gonna sound very weird, but I need you to make me cry for real, because in order to tell a good story, we need to tap on real life raw emotion. And and I would say be my guest. You're not going to offend me at all. What you say, like you can even say, you can use indirect meta references. Like, why don't you come up with like a cool podcast, like a really crappy podcast, and call it Cody's Awful Suck Panel or something like that. Take real life implements and put it into the storyline. How would you react if someone asked you about that kind of method?
Again, I think the process for every actor is individual. And so what you honestly want to do is you want to create respect amongst your fellow actors so that you can find the truth of the story. That is, like, as I said, in anything, even if I'm just doing a commercial line in a, introducing the all new iPhone 14, I'm trying to find the truth. I'm trying to find what is it I'm communicating. So the more realism you can bring to something, the more detailed, the more authentic, the more truthful it's going to be. But my immediate thing would be to always involve whoever the director is.
Okay.
To make sure that they're part of it, because we, as the actors, don't always see the full picture of what it is the director is trying to create. So you want to make sure, if the director might be like, I actually don't want you to cry in the scene, which you'd think, but that's weird, right? I want you to almost cry in this scene because I want to see that raw emotion, but I want you to fight that. You know what I mean? So, because that's going to be more, so then I still might do those kinds of things, but it's a collaboration. It's always a collaboration. And you want to do it in a respectful way. So if you're cool with that, and I'm cool with that, and the director's like, yeah, I think that's going to be awesome. That's going to create authenticity. Then that's what we'll do. We'll play with it. We'll play around, and what I mean. But if the director's like, nah, that's too much. I think that's going to be too much for the scene I'm trying to create, because in my story, this has to also happen, and this has to also happen. You go, oh, okay, right. So it's always a collaboration. But yeah, I don't have much issue with stuff like that. I mean, when I was younger, I loved the idea of method acting. I loved that stuff, of really immersing yourself into a world where almost like you're living it. But as I got older, as I became more of a professional, worked more, developed technique, went to school, learned, I don't always think that that's necessary. Again, I'm not going to judge a person's process. I've worked with many method actors in my lifetime. It's to each its own. It's whatever gets you to telling the truth. I'm fully on board with, as long as you're not actually physically hurting somebody else or actually being disrespectful to a person in real life, or but I'm not necessarily a method actor. I'm more of a person who believes that it's my job to do my homework and use what's the words on the page and collaborate with my fellow artists, the director, the editor, the
team player,
the cinematographer, or the recording engineer, and the other actors, and all of us, and we will create that reality together. And so I would never want to do. I would hope that my fellow actors and my fellow artists would never want to do something specifically selfish for themselves. It should be a collaboration. And I wouldn't want to put a person in a situation where I'm going, this is all about do my thing, do what I want to do, because that's what I need. I go, it's a collaboration, right? It's right. I mean, yes.
So we all eat together.
Yes.
It's like, Peter, you're a killer with all these great lines, man. I'm gonna have to hire you as my line writer for for quotes.
Don't do it, Pete.
We all I'm guessing you're Italian there, Lanza.
I'm quite a few things. I'm a mutt. I'm a Puerto Rican, Cuban, Italian, and Irish.
Okay, yeah, there we go. I got some of that too. I mean, English, Italian, Canadian, all that. I mean, eat together. So we can all. I like
you saying that, Pete. That actually leads very well to my next question. So thank you for that smooth transition. The next question, one of the final questions I have for you, Vince, is. And this is going to be a typical nerd question of me asking. I ask all my guests this, and that is, when I'm not on a strict diet, almost military-like, I'm an absolute foodie. And I was just curious to know which production company that you've worked on had the best catering scene.
Catering. Oh my God, that is a tough one. I've been on a lot of productions with some great food. Yeah, I honestly couldn't answer that. I mean, um, I truly, I'd be hard pressed to answer. I'm trying to think what's the best meal I've ever had. I was on a set once. I'm remembering where they, but I don't remember which production it was. It was a movie that we were doing, and they every morning. Whenever I work on set, especially if it's an early morning shoot, the first thing I always want as soon as I get to set is a coffee,
Mhm.
a good coffee, hopefully. And I love an egg sandwich. I love like a fried egg sandwich. It's one of my favorite
Oh,
things.
bless you.
It's one of my favorite ways to start a day. And I remember this one set. I'm very specific too. Like I want some ketchup. I want, I have a way that I like to make the sandwich. And not always as a caterer, they kind of slap something together. It's a fried egg sandwich. What's the big deal about it? But I'm very specific about, too much ketchup's going to suck. And this production, I remember they always made it perfectly. And gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting, because I remember being on it for multiple days, like being on it for, a good, like maybe week or two. Well, I think it was Hangman. I think it was Hangman, the with Lou Diamond Phillips. And so that every day they already would have it ready for me. It's almost like and it would be fresh and hot. So it wasn't like they pre-made it and then sat it aside going, well, whenever Vince shows up, we'll give him this cold egg sandwich. It was like they knew I was about to arrive, and then I'd literally step on set, and sometimes it would just be waiting in my trailer, and I was like, yes. Exactly, you know what I mean? Like it's just like, all of a sudden you have that like thing where you're thinking, man, I'm a big shot. Like, you're not. You're my perfect egg sandwich, my perfect coffee. Like, oh man, the perks,
When
the
you sit
little
down on the chair, you're like, I made it.
yeah, exactly,
This is
exactly. Something so simple as that, right? Whereas I've also been on sets where having wonderful full meals, like you sit down at dinner time and they're serving fantastic, like restaurant style food. But I don't remember that because but just something simple like that, where it's specific for me. And I'm pretty sure it was Hangman, now that I think about it, because that was a movie that was on. We shot that for like a month, and we long, like 14-hour days, 16-hour days, like overnight shoots, and cold. It was winter in Canada. We finished shooting on my birthday, and actually it wasn't supposed to. We were supposed to finish shooting the night before, but we went over time, shot something like 24 hours straight, that it was my birthday by the time they said that's a wrap on set, like we're done, like picture wrap. And I was like, happy birthday to me. Like, that was fun. I'm pretty sure it was Hangman, because that fried egg sandwich, I remember that every day, and like sometimes showing up freezing cold at 4 o'clock in the morning, and to have a perfectly piping hot coffee and that perfect sandwich, you're like, yes,
That sounds
I made it.
really satisfying.
This is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Something simple as that, right? It's not like the best in gnocchi or the best,
It's the simple things in life always.
Yeah.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. It's again going back to the beginning of our interview. It's the details. It's the details, right? It's like,
Every little detail.
Every little thing counts.
that's right.
And before I ask my final question, Pete, Chris, do you guys have any final comments for Vince?
Vince, it's been an absolute honor.
Uh,
I would love to know a little bit about your daily workout routine and your resume sometimes, because you look fantastic. And,
thanks. Sometimes as the clock is ticking down to my 50th birthday, yikes!
you look great.
Like,
Like,
wait a minute.
when I say counting down, I mean we're talking like hours almost, a few days away from
Wow.
breaking 50.
Wait,
Honestly, I can't. I sometimes can't. I say the number and I'm like, that's just not possible.
You're past 25.
The new things like neck cramps when you wake up in the morning and having to stretch before you get out of bed. I'm like, whose body is this? This isn't my body. I'm like, I don't understand this, having to roll on a foam roller at 8 a.m. in the morning in order to be able to, before I even have my first sip of my coffee. Because I can't actually physically move. So that's not fun. But I work out pretty much 6 days a week. It's just it's just something that I've done since I was really young. I love it. It's very much a part of my wife and my life. Together, we, staying healthy, staying fit, wanting to live a long life. I recommend it to anybody. It's not always about a look. It's about feeling good too. And, but obviously, it's nice to see results. If you're
Nice to
putting
see
in the work.
results. Yes.
If you're putting in the work and you're like, yeah, I still can't lose that 5 pounds. You know, that's not fun. Nobody likes that. So yeah.
Always, it's like take it as 1,000 steps or 10,000 steps, however many it takes to probably climb Mount Everest.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're right.
That's
Right, Chris.
Ooh, listen, man, I hope I'm in as good a shape as you at 50. You look great.
Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. This is a shocking revelation. Vince, you're past 25?
I know. That's what I was saying. When you said I did something back in 1998, I don't remember being alive at that point.
Yeah, because that doesn't
Something-
make sense.
Something's not adding up, man. We got to go back and look at the math. I think we gotta
Exactly,
do some
'cause
math.
you're
And
right, Vince.
unfortunately, I'm an actor, so math is not my my strong point. So let's
Neither
just
is mine.
I say let's say 25. I like that. It sounds about right. Let's go with 25.
25 is
But
good.
even if
25 is a good year.
no, even 20 is even better. We can go 22.
He can't have his drinks yet. He
I
can't
know.
enjoy himself.
I think we might be pushing that. Let's put a filter. Let's put a filter on
25 solid.
my camera. Yeah, we might.
Chris, any final comments, buddy? Chris?
She definitely play roles. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Cool. So Vince, you definitely play a good range of characters. Would you say, though, because I would definitely say that you play both protagonist and antagonist very well.
Yes.
Is there a preference between either? It's always usually been the antagonist. And I'm always wondering if you share that sentiment.
You know, I don't again, like saying, do you have a preference over voiceover, film, TV, theater? No, I don't have a preference. I just want to always, personally, I'm always hoping that I get to have a really rich, detailed, layered character so that you get to play more. You have to use your imagination. That's my favorite thing. So if the protagonist has lots of layers and has lots of history and backstory and is detailed and interesting and has a lot of things that's affected that character in their lives, that's going to be fascinating to me. And I hope that for the antagonist as well. I will say the only reason that I would probably lean a little more towards the antagonist is because you're often getting to experience and play things that you may never even remotely have experienced or thought of or done. You know, like I've never murdered anybody. I hope I never will. I have no plans and interest in that. But I've had the fun and the pleasure of murdering people on camera, on stage, in video games with my voice. And so antagonist often gets to do things where you go, Vince Corazza, will probably never experience that in my real life. So for this moment in time, I get to unabashedly, no holds barred, get to dive into what that might be like. What would a person like that think? How would that person feel? What would they be? What would that situation be like? And again, if you're trying to find the honest truth of it, then there's no holds. You're not going, well, let's do this in a safe way. I don't want to be, if I've got to scream something really foul and awful that I would never say in real life, so hurtful, as you were talking about earlier, Peter, like in a scene where, make me cry.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a person cry in real life. That's so mean. But just for that moment,
Have a little fun,
let's have some fun. Let's see what I can say that makes you cry. You know what I mean? And at the end of it, the director's gonna yell cut, and we're gonna go, that was awesome. You don't in real life insult someone or hurt their feelings and then go, thanks, man, that was really fun. You're like, you get to shake hands and be like, yes, man, I made you cry. And you're like, thanks for making me cry. Like,
Thanks, brother.
yeah. So I mean, that's the one thing about being an antagonist, that you often get to play weird, quirky details that the protagonist is often the person that you want the audience to relate to the most. That's typically, right? You want the protagonist to be the journey that the audience, they're seeing through that person's eyes. And so oftentimes you want the audience to connect and to feel, to go, oh, I get that. I understand that because I've been there. And so that still fun because I really want to bring out those true emotions for people and those true feelings. But the antagonist is the guy where the audience often goes, "Oh, I've never thought that. I've never felt that, or what would that?" You know what I mean? And so that's the twist that the antagonist often brings the conflict and brings the monkey wrench into that gets thrown into the wheel. You know what I mean? And so you get that fun play.
I feel like you probably get a lot more fun voice options as the antagonist too, because I feel like protagonists usually have more of a straightforward, as opposed to as an antagonist, you probably have more of a.
There's more of a leeway there.
There's you do get to sometimes with an antagonist go, "Hey director, hey producer, hey writers, I've got this idea," and a lot of times they'll respond and be like, "I like that. Let's add that in. I didn't think of that." Whereas a protagonist, you will often get things like, "I got this idea," but if the director or the producer or the storyteller or the writer is like, "I like that," but then that's going to change the way this story is going to progress. That might bring a different, sometimes it does work, but you're right. There is a little more. You have to. I have this saying of being an actor to me is like Robin Hood with his bag, with his, his arrows, quiver of arrows, right? And what I've tried to do in my lifetime is put as many different arrows in there. Like one's an explosive arrow, one's just a straight arrow, one's a fire arrow, one's, what I mean? Like, but in what that means in real life is one is, the memory of meeting my wife, or one is the memory of the first time I played Carlos, the first time I did a video game. And those are little things that you're drawing from your life to fire out there so that the audience can feel and connect. With an antagonist, with different characters, or like if you're playing an alien or playing a god or playing, things like that, you get to add new arrows to the quiver. You get to pull out things where you're like, "Here's a weird one. Why don't we fire this one into the mix and see what happens?" The protagonist is often going to be like trying to avoid getting hit. You know what I mean? Like the protagonist is, because that's what the audience is going, "I want to live. You're my hero. Whereas the antagonist is the one that's going, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, I got this one." Like, it's a little more. So oftentimes there's a little more play and a little more fun and a little more, which is, again, I go back to what I said earlier. I'm a 2-year-old in a 50-year-old man's body. I just want to play. I just want to, I want to open my Christmas present and be like, "What? It's a transformer. What?"
That's awesome.
The final question I have for you, Vince, is what's next for Vince Corazza? Now, this is the part of my show where, like, because this is an open forum, this is where I pass the proverbial microphone onto you. You can talk about anything you want. You can say, promote, hype, anything you want. Absolute no filters. The floor is yours, Vince.
Right now I do the promos, all the promotional spots for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which I'm super incredibly proud to be a part of that show. I love him. He is a genius. I align incredibly closely with a lot of his views in life in general. And so I've been doing that for 8. We're in season 8. The only unfortunate thing about it is because of the scheduling and stuff, it makes it difficult for me to do. I can't do theater right now. I can't do film and TV because I have to be available to record at a drop of a dime if a guest changes. And so, there's a give and take with it, but that's what I've been doing for 8 years. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of other things, going on. There's, projects and stuff, voiceover wise. But yeah, I mean, I'm just I super love doing that job. I love being part of a show and being part of something that I feel like isn't just, I mean, he's a brilliant entertainer. He's funny. He's clever. He's so intelligent. He's speaking, he's using a format that is typically just geared towards, let's have fun, it's entertainment, and he is able to use that format to also educate and say important things and challenge things in this world, and in a clever, humorous way too, so that you're not trying to shove stuff down a person's throat. You're saying, "Hey, let's think about this," and while you're thinking about that, that's kind of funny too, or let's poke fun at some people that seem to be a bit crazy or manipulative in this world, and I love that. I think he's awesome. So that's kind of what I'm currently doing, and loving it. It's a fabulous job. Fun to
That's
be part
awesome.
of that.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's right there in the city as well, too, right?
Yep, yeah. The Late Show records at the Ed Sullivan Theater on Broadway. It's literally 2 blocks away from where I'm sitting right now.
That's perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Gotta go one day.
I used to live over in the Upper East Side in Harlem.
Oh, right on.
My whole life. So we just recently moved out to PA, but we're looking to go back soon. And
All
yeah,
right.
no, that's awesome. I
gotta
remember
go.
visiting around there a lot, and I would see where they film like the Tonight Show,
Yep.
all those shows, and it's
The
really
Rockefeller Center, and we're
Yep.
we're on Broadway. We're actually on Broadway, which is
on
rare.
Broadway.
There's
Yeah,
not
that's
a lot of
better. Even
Yeah.
better.
there's not a lot of original theaters that act. I mean, you always hear that phrase Broadway, which consists of
Broadway
a
shows.
lot of theater and a lot of theaters, but they're
Yeah.
not physically located on the actual street.
On the Strip. Yeah,
On
they
the
took
Strip.
a lot of them down.
Yeah, well, you got the Winter Garden, you got the Broadway Theater, the Ed Sullivan, and the Ed
Mhm.
Sullivan now it's actually a Broadway theater, but it's been used for forever as it's the Ed Sullivan for decades now is the Ed Sullivan Theater, and then David Letterman, and then Colbert, and so it's also fun to be part of history too, like or at least be promoting history. I'm not necessarily part of the actual physical show, but to be
But
vocal.
you were in it. It's basically everything you've done. You've been a part of a history at this point.
Yeah,
and
you're a
it's
legend.
just
You're
that's
still- yeah.
awesome. I gotta give it to you. You've lived your life and you've done
Thanks.
all these things where I would kill to have those opportunities just to be like, wow, I did it. This is awesome. I got my own egg sandwich made for me too. I didn't have to, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's awesome. I absolutely admire it. It's very inspiring.
Thanks,
It is.
guys.
It
Thanks a
really
lot.
is.
I appreciate it. It was a fun interview.
Well, Vince, before you go, I just want to say a couple of things before we conclude. First of all, I just want to say thank you for not only this amazing interview, but and I think Pete and Chris can actually sympathize with what I'm about to say here. You have this incredible gift, Vince, where you can make a 30-something-year-old fan and bring them way down here to make them feel like that 9-year-old kid playing Resident Evil again. And at the same token, make them feel like that kid going to Blockbuster Video renting out Kingdom Hearts.
Right on.
And
Right on.
one final thing before you go, and I feel like you deserve this. I waited since I was 9 to give you this, and that is thank you, Vince. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Vince. Thank you for a great interview. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Vince, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody watching. And I will send you a copy of this interview as soon as it's done. But thank you, Peter, for joining us. Thank you, Chris, for once again coming on. And have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays. Thanks, guys. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Vince.